Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Put the Guidebook Down, brought to you by Kultura Travel with me, Kiara, the creator, as your host. Last episode, we started to dive into this idea of travelers versus tourists. In this week's episode, we're going to break it down even further to what it means to go beyond the surface level of both terms. And I'm not going to call people out, but I'm also going to call people out. So this is for you. If you are staying in hostels and calling yourself a traveler because you're so cool staying in those hostels, well, guess what? You might just be a tourist in disguise. In last week's episode, we started to talk about those general characteristics that get associated with tourists, such as the Hawaiian shirts, walking around with the cameras on your neck. My favorite one that I'm seeing more and more frequently is the iPhone or Android phone strap around your neck. Come on, guys. You're not fooling anyone with those. You might as well just be wearing a label that says tourist on your shirt. Selfie sticks, big group tours, chain restaurants, and a large group of people moving together between the most popular tourist destination. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a tourist too. Sometimes I am a tourist still. There's no denying that being a tourist is still some part of traveling. However, I have myself begun to shift more into this idea of traveler. And this can be, as we mentioned, defined by different meanings and going deeper beyond the surface level when it comes to travel as the definition of traveler. But for me, I'm going to draw it in onto my own experiences from when I moved abroad to teach English with Fulbright in Moldova. This is really when I became more familiar with the idea of being a traveler. Why? Because I was literally dropped and living and immersing into the culture of a town where English was literally not spoken. I had, with my assignment, requested to be placed in an area where Russian speakers were more predominant so I could practice my language skills in Russian, and instead I was placed in a Romanian speaking town. Now, for me, this was an exciting challenge because I have studied linguistics. I love learning languages and I like to work to overcome language barriers. For me, it became this idea of a traveler and becoming that expat immersed into the community by learning Romanian, taking the time to go to workshops or into different homes to speak with local families, learn their stories, learn their cooking traditions. One of my most favorite memories was in Orhevec at Villa Rose, which is a famous homestay in the area, and cooking with the host Placinta together in the kitchen. And for those of you who don't know, Placinta is a traditional Moldovan pastry, some might say, or like snack or meal, depending on how it's prepared and served. For me, traveler is really someone who wants to learn about the people, area, history, language of where they're visiting and take the extra step to make those deeper, long-lasting connections, because they're therefore leaving, not just maybe visiting the number one tourist site or attraction in the area, they're leaving with those stories, new changed perspectives and mindsets. And some might start to question me saying, hey, why are you talking about this now? Because everyone always talks about tourists and we still market the whole industry as tourism. It's not travelerism, right? Is this now like a new marketing idea, scheme, ego? What is it? No. This is genuine people trying to create a genuine movement so that we are traveling more ethically, more meaningfully, and more authentically. And in my opinion, you can be both a tourist and a traveler. I believe it's possible to do them simultaneously. I think it's possible to have your trip be both part traveler, both part tourist. But the idea is that we're getting people to be more interested in pursuing that traveler identity, starting to tip the scale between tourists and travelers. That's a little bit more higher up into the traveler side than the tourism side. And I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm not fully innocent with being 100% traveler. I like to think that I fall more like 70% traveler, 30% tourist, because I like to learn the language of where I'm visiting, go the extra mile to really talk with like the local cab drivers that I'm with or the bus drivers, to take public transportation as an alternative to Uber. I like to go into the hole-in-the-wall restaurants where maybe they have no Yelp profile and I just stumbled upon it and their menu's not even in English, so translators needed. That's where I like to go. But there are times when safety comes into consideration, your comfortability. Then also, if you have been planning this dream vacation, right, and there's a seven wonder of the world there, you're still going to want to visit that, right? So I'll give an example from one of my most recent travels, which was to Morocco. And this trip was a little bit different in its setup because I was actually visiting a friend who did the same English teaching program with Fulbright that I did in Moldova, but they did it in Morocco. So I already had a connection with someone who was already doing that deeper immersion into the local community and life and learning the language. For me, I was visiting and I had explicitly mentioned beforehand that I wanted to visit some of the major sites that are considered more onto the tourism side of like checklist travels. For example, going into the Merzouga destination experience with the desert and the Sahara, camping, etc., which falls into some more of our discussions in Kultura Travel with authentically curated experiences versus authentic travel experiences. The trip we opted to take out of convenience for traveling with our group at that time was more of the authentically curated travel experience. That meant like we were literally shuttled around in a bus with a bunch of other tourists and then going through this kind of simulation bubble with a set group of guides who were all fluent in English, who do this all the time with millions of travelers a year. There was nothing completely unique for our travels versus maybe someone else's experience. I like to call it the cookie cutter travel. And due to our budget and time in the country, we were aware of this and we were okay with it at that time. That said, that was our kind of touristy side of our travel itinerary. On the other side of it, we had the more traveler side. I visited during Ramadan. And because I had my friends, colleagues with me who were already living in the communities, one of the more rewarding experiences I had from my trip to Morocco was actually the invitations to participate in different iftars with the local communities. And with that, I was able to cook some local dishes, meet locals, hear their stories, and help with spreading out the table and celebration for them to break their fast after the sun had went down. That was kind of an example of a time where I went to a destination with a balance between tourist and traveler experiences. That said, like what I want to mention is that this is a case in point example of how it's going to leave a more meaningful memory and impression with you when you go that more traveler route over the touristy one. Make the extra effort to do those deeper connections. And when I say that, it doesn't mean you have to completely go out of your way and to go off the beaten path to have that experience. Even if we think of the possibility of you being in Venezia in Italy, it's a very touristy thing to do the gondola rides. But if you're going all that way, you're not going to skip out on the gondola rides. Like that would be so funny. I don't think I've ever yet met a person who went to Venice and completely skipped a gondola ride. If you're there, please mention in the comments. Would love to know why. But an example of trying to take that touristy experience and make it into more of a traveler experience would be to take the time to actually chat with your gondola taxi driver, gondola, I don't know, gondola driver, rower, you get the point. But to ask them about their family, maybe even start such a good conversation that you guys end up going out for an espresso together and getting to chat. Maybe your connection's so good that you end up getting invited to a family dinner. I don't know. See, these things it may be weird, and to other people like, whoa, red flag, is that safe? Always use your intuition and your inner feeling of scaling out a situation if it's safe or not. But these situations do happen. I have also been in a situation where I just met someone while in an experience, and then we got to talking about like traditions, culture, language, etc. And I ended up going back for their family celebration or birthday or something. And that again is back to the main point of traveler experiences, more meaningful, more memorable, and deeper. Now going beyond this whole idea of traveler versus tourist and my earlier explanations, I really want to talk about how this really impacts your journey while traveling. Does it really make a difference to learn those 5 or 10 phrases in a language when you're abroad only for a short period of time? 110%. I'm sure you've seen the videos on Instagram or TikTok where someone's visiting Egypt, for example, and they're haggling back and forth, and the price is starting at like $100 for some kind of scarf or something. And the conversation started in English with them going back and forth, being like, this is too high. No, this is not like within my budget. This is not the fabric that I'm looking for, etc. You can imagine it. Then when they switch to Arabic, the price suddenly significantly drops to maybe $20. Because then they're like, oh, you get some more of the cultural context, my language. It's like more familial in that idea of like culture and community. So I think that's one of the examples that comes to mind. I've seen it also myself where I was in a market in Moldova just buying produce, and the fact that I could speak Romanian and Russian, they'd be super excited and end up giving me a bunch of extra treats or veggies for free on top of what I was already paying for, even though I was like insisting, saying no, it's not like, I'm not asking for that, just like let me pay for my 5 tomatoes. And they go, no, here's a treat because you are learning Romanian. It's just stuff like that where it's like uncommon and unexpected, and they have a more open mind and appreciation for you and your presence in their country. And then like this experience and that kind of exchange makes you take a step back and say, where does this intentionality play in my regular life, in my next travels, etc.? How does it help me approach travel in the future now that I've had such experiences? I think it starts to change our mindset and our perspective when creating our travel plans and where potentially we want to go as a destination in that selection. I think a big part of it as well is that you start to see yourself seeking out more of those unique experiences rather than the cookie cutter tourism side when it comes to travel. I know that for me, that has always now become the case when I do my future travels after living abroad in these different remote destinations. For me, going back to my Morocco example, just because that's, again, the most recent one, I had the whole checklist of quote-unquote travel influencer recommended sites. Some of them I was genuinely curious about, some of them I wasn't. But within that, I made case in points. I was like, oh, I would love to go to learn how to make Moroccan rugs. I would love to talk with someone who was from a Berber tradition. And I would like to learn more about the Berber language. And because I had those previous experiences where I saw the impact of knowing the local language and asking those deeper cultural questions, it made me more eager to find those experiences in my next destination. While in Morocco, I did meet someone who had come from the Berber tribe who spoke Berber and therefore explained their alphabet, pronunciation, linguistic formation, etc. This also has come out more in my comfortability of being a solo traveler. I know more of like what to look for, not to look for, where my comfortability lies. And for me, like then I have like a wider selection to being where I'm going to travel, right? Maybe someone who's newer to travel may stick more to Western Europe because of the higher probability of someone knowing English, if your first language is English, for example, and having that familiarity of all of the existing tourism. There's going to be much better transportation or options available for accommodations versus somewhere like Romania, right? There's not a lot of information out there when it comes to Romanian tourism. A lot of people just think of Bucharest and that's it. But Romania is such a big country. There's so much to explore. I also highly recommend it. But it's just an example of someone who maybe has traveled more, becomes more open to going into the unknown, or where there's less information, and then creating their own itinerary and doing the extra step research where they're going to be flexible and adaptable in their travel. And then that comes to the point of question, are there places where it's almost impossible to avoid being like a tourist? And I think this is such a good question because you think of those dream destinations, right, of going to like Paris and seeing like the Eiffel Tower. Again, there are just some destinations where there's just bucket list experiences that you go there and you're going there to see that number one tourist attraction, right? Going to the Eiffel Tower. You're still going to do that. It's possible that you're just going to be a tourist the entire time. Perhaps you go the extra step to maybe do a cultural tour around that iconic landmark so you get the history context of it. And from that point, you're able to meet some of the locals if you go to a local event in the area or from that tour group and able to have those deeper conversations and connections, and then maybe go to a local recommended cafe, go to a local recommended restaurant, etc., because you talk to the local tour guide from there. My biggest recommendation would be coming to those bigger points of like, oh, is it possible to not be a tourist while still going to like those touristy things? I would say 100% yes. You just have to be a little bit more creative in your ideas and approach to this. If I'm going to break it down how you can start to approach that, number one is going to be observe. You're going to want to watch, listen, notice your surroundings, what's going on around you. You can, once you take a pause and a step back, you're going to see the tourist stick out like a sore thumb. Then you can decide, am I going to want to be associated with that? Am I not going to want to be associated with that? And then this is what I need to do. The second one is to participate. What you're going to do with that now. Are you going to join the local customs? Are you going to try to put more of an effort in with the language, cultural gestures, etc.? The third and last point is going to be to learn. And this is like the number one thing. It sounds so simple because it is, and I feel it's one of the most commonly forgotten ones now, especially with our checklist travelers and tourism. Ask those questions. You paid all this money to get to that dream destination. Don't you want to learn about something of the destination you're visiting? For example, if you're going to a shop, ask the shopkeep, like, how do you say thank you? How do you say hello? If you're at a restaurant, ask how you say for the tip, for the check, etc. Learn those words, try new foods, be open. That's the biggest thing, is just be open-minded to new experiences. And if you're going to ask me what's the number one thing someone could do to step out of the tourist bubble tomorrow, it's going to be that, is literally ask questions. Be reflective. Put the phone down. Maybe you can Google the information, but hey, there is someone right next to you who's from the area. Ask them. You're going to have that communication, that memory, that exchange, and it could lead to a whole new friendship, for example. It could lead to a whole new experience. You never know, but you gotta try. And because of that, you're gonna end up coming back with a very big flex of being a traveler then, because you took that extra step of putting the phone down and asking questions. Someone, for example, and this is from now my personal experience, is you end up asking a local question during your guided tour. Next thing, you're invited to go out to a coffee with you and a couple of the other people in your group who are genuinely interested in the culture and learning about the local language. And then from there, you get invited to a whole other like backpacking trip, for example, just because you took the initiative to show that you care. It happens, I promise, and I know several people who have had that experience. That's why I say, why not? Give it a try. Step out of that comfort zone, become uncomfortable, and get comfortable in the uncomfortable. At the end of the day, it's not just about whether you're a traveler or a tourist. It's about whether you let a place change you and your perspective, or if you just pass through taking photos. Think about it. And you never know what may happen when you put that guidebook down. And that's why we are here at Kultura Travel, to help you see and open your eyes to the new side of travel once you go beyond that travel checklist, beyond typical tourism, and you put the guidebook down. Be sure to check out our website and see the different experiences that we offer for you to go beyond the expected when it comes to tourism. Thank you so much, guys. Catch you on the next episode.